بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعثي الأنبياء والمرسلين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين الذين كلامهم نور وأمرهم رشد ووصيتهم التقوى وفعلهم الخير وعادتهم الإحسان وسجيتهم الكرم لا سيما للحسين المذلوم المقتول المجروح العطشان المذبوح من القفاء في يوم عاشوراء في أرض كربلاء بلا جرم ولا خطأ الذي غسله دم وكفنه رمال كربلاء مقطع الأعضاء مسلوب العمامة والرداء يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة صدق الله العلي العظيم. When a person looks at the riwayat and the narrations that speak about the world in what is known as Akhir al-Zaman, or the riwayat that speak about the status of this world just before the reappearance of Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, Ajjalillahu ta'ala farajuhu al-Sharif, you find that these narrations are of different types. For some narrations in this regard speak about the signs of his reappearance and what takes place on this earth before the holy Imam comes out from the darkness of Ghaibah. Some of these riwayat speak about the situation on the earth, the political situation. Or some riwayat speak about the status of the believer and what the believer will have to go through during that period of time known as the end of times. But you find one concept and one idea that is stressed upon in these riwayat. And this is a concept, not only is it not specific to this point in time, Akhir al-Zaman, it's a concept that applies in every single period of time, and that is the concept or the idea of fitna. For not only does Quranul Kareem speak about this idea of fitna, we find that these narrations that speak about the end of times speak about the fitna that comes in the end of these times. And I wish today to look at this concept of fitna, to understand what we mean by this concept, what are the ways that we are told to be aware of fitna, what is meant by the fitna of Akhir al-Zaman, and why is it that some people tried to describe what took place on the 10th of Muharram as a fitna and why they were incorrect. In analyzing this concept and beginning this discussion, my first question that arises is you find when a person looks or sees or analyzes certain things that change around him or her. Every single person notices certain changes. Changes in the world around them, changes in the community that they live in, changes in the society that they are based in. Sometimes a person, when they notice changes, they are in constant anticipation of what is known as the end of times. So the first question is, should the believer be in this type of anticipation in regards to the end of time and the signs of the end of times? Or should I not be in anticipation of the signs of the coming of the day of judgment or the signs of the 12th Imam? What do I mean? What I mean is that you find people to be of two types. One type of person, whenever something changes politically, or whenever they see a change in their society or community, they constantly relate that to the end of times. They begin to think what has been written about the end of times. That person is in a constant state of anticipation and thinking about the end of this world, the reappearance of the Imam, the day of Qiyamah. There's another person, however, who sees the changes in the world, politically, socially, in regards to religion, and isn't bothered about what takes place. It makes no difference to them whether something is happening in this world or not. They are comfortable in their life. They're not in that state of anticipation. And so my first question is, should I be like the first person? Whatever they see reminds them of the day of judgment, of Sahib al-Asr, of Akhir al-Zaman? Or should I be of the second type of person that isn't that much bothered? Or should I be in between both? And the answer to this question is given by Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala. Or a person comes to the Imam, he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, every single day I wake up before the time of Salatul Fajr. Why do you do so? For ibadah and worship. The narrations say that person lies who says he or she loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet they are asleep during the time of tahajjud. A person can only show their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if they wake up and converse with their Lord during the time of tahajjud. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I wake up very early and I do my ibadah and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a number of hours, and then I pray Salatul Fajr. And normally, because I've woken up so early, I get very tired. And normally I would sleep. However, there's one reason why I make sure that I stay awake even after the time of Fajr until the sun rises. Naturally, he's woken up so early. As soon as he prays Salatul Fajr, he's tired. He wishes to sleep. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, but I don't do so. So the Imam asks him, why? Why do you stay awake even after you've prayed Salatul Fajr and your hours of worship? He says, because Ya ibn Rasulullah, I have heard from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam that one of the signs of the end of times and one of the signs of the day of judgment is that the sun, instead of rising from the east, shall rise from the west. He says, yes, this is one of the signs of the end of times. He says, every single day after I pray Salatul Fajr, I wait until the sun rises so I can see whether it has risen from the west or whether it has risen to the east, so I can see whether the end of times and the day of Qiyamah has come or not. Once I see that the sun has risen from the east, I go to sleep. Now when this person presents that to the Imam, and he's saying, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I do this every single day, it's difficult for me to stay awake. If this was something that was classified in the eyes of the Imam as too much, you don't need to go to that much effort. You don't need to be in that much anticipation. If this was seen as something above the limit, something extreme, the Imam would have told him. But what does the Imam reply? The Holy Imam doesn't say what you're doing is too much. You don't have to be in such anticipation for the end of times. The Imam said, don't worry. Continue doing what you're doing, but I'll give you a way that you can find this out before having to wait till the sun rises. So after Salatul Fajr, you can go to sleep now. He says, how, Ibn Rasulullah? He says, when the time of Fajr comes, we know that there is darkness in the sky and the horizon. When the time of Fajr comes, there is a beam of light that breaks that darkness. And this is what we call a subh as-sadiq. He says, when you see that beam of light that breaks the darkness of the horizon, see which part of the horizon that beam of light has come from. If it is from the east, then know that the sun will also rise where? From the east. And if it is from the west, know that today the sun is rising from the west. The end of times have come. And so the Imam didn't tell him what you're doing is too much. The idea being is that one of the qualities of the believer is that they're very wary of this idea of the end of times and how certain things are triggers or signs of us getting closer to that moment in time. If this first question has been understood, my second question then comes, is I said that the riwayat speak about the concept of fitna. What is meant by the term fitna? The term fitna, if you look in Quranul Kareem uses fitna in a number of different ways. In fact, certain people have said fitna has 10 different meanings. So first we need to understand the lexicology, the literal meaning of this term, to understand then what is our discussion. The literal meaning of the term fitna is I take a piece of gold that has just been dug out from the ground. What will be the state of that piece of gold? Just now, this piece of gold has been dug out from the ground. Naturally, it will be mixed. Part of it will be pure gold, part of it will be impurity. When I wish to purify that golden ore, that piece of gold that I have just extracted from the ground, the way to do so is to heat it up to a certain temperature. And when you heat that gold to a certain temperature, the impurity is separated and what remains is pure gold. This in Arabic was called fitna, fitnatul dhahab. Likewise, we have fitnatul fidda. I take that piece of silver, I heat it up to a certain temperature, the impurities are separated. This was the original meaning of the term fitna. And then we're told, Quranul Kareem uses this word in a number of different meanings. For example, the most obvious meaning of fitna that Quranul Kareem uses is to mean the trials and tests of a human being. For example, Quranul Kareem says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Does a person think that they can say, I believe, I'm a mu'min, I believe and I won't be tested? No, surely they will go through fitna. This meaning of fitna is what? Tests, trial and tribulation. And you can very clearly see the link between this meaning and what I said is fitna to dhahab. Why? Because when I heat up that dhahab and gold, the impurity is removed. The whole philosophy of trial and tribulation is that it clears a person of the impurities of their soul and the sins that they have performed. This is one meaning. Another meaning of fitna that Quranul Kareem uses is not trial and tribulation, is adhab and punishment. For Quranul Kareem also uses the word fitna to describe the hellfire. But then there is a third meaning that we are speaking about. The third meaning of fitna that we are referring to is when there is a type of confusion created in any group of people, in any society, in any community, such that confusion causes disunity because haqq is mixed with batil. Truth is mixed with falsehood and I'm unable to distinguish from the two. This is what we mean by the concept of fitna and what is meant by fitna of Akhirul Zaman, where the line between haqq and batil is not clear and there is disunity sowed amongst the people. And Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam very beautifully explains to us one of the qualities of this fitna. For not only can I not differentiate between haqq and batil, truth and falsehood, he says one of the qualities of fitna is that when it is happening, no one realizes. No one is aware that the fitna is taking place. After it has settled, then I realize that I just went through fitna. And so some scholars have described it as such. When you have a sandstorm and you're unable to see clearly, this is that sandstorm. You only realize it took place once the sand settles. And the question comes, what is the link between this meaning of fitna that we're using and the original meaning of the gold and its impurity? The answer is quite simple. The reason why fitna was called fitna is because when these events take place in any group of people or society or community, after the fitna, we realize which people from that community were pure, which people were impure. For how many times does a fitna take place? You used to think that this person is a person of religion and ethics and morals. After the fitna settles, you realize the haqiqah and the reality of that person. And so my second question, we've understood what we are referring to when we say the term fitna. The third question then that I have is fitna in general. How is it that a mu'min should deal with it? Put aside fitna of the end of times, any fitna. How is it that I should deal with it? And here again, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam very beautifully, in a well-known narration to his son Imam al-Hasan salamullah alayhi, speaks about how to deal with fitna. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, kun fil fitnati kabn al-labun. La dhahrun fayurkab, wala dhar'un fayuhlab, wala wabarun fayuslab. He says, when it comes to fitna, be like the Ibn al-Labun. Ya Abul Hasan, what is Ibn al-Labun? He said it is the young lamb or the child of the camel that is male. And technically, Ibn al-Labun has just completed 2 years and entered into its third. Be in fitna like that. Why? He says, La dhahrun fayurkab. It's got no back that you can sit on it and ride it. La dhar'un fayuhlab. It has no udder that you can take milk from it. Wala wabarun fayuslab. And it has no fur and hair lest you can take hair from it. Meaning what? Meaning Amir al-Mu'mineen says when it comes to fitna, don't allow yourself to be used in propagating batil and falsehood. And the way that you can't use this young lamb or the child of the sheep, don't allow yourself to be a proponent of fitna and disunity and supporting that which is batil. And the scholars then come and say, look, think about what the Imam has said. Why did he choose the back, then the milk and the hair? So the scholar said each of these was a sign. The back refers to a person's power and strength. Don't allow your power and strength to support batil in those times of fitna. The milk and the hair refers to a person's resources and money. Don't allow your money to be used in supporting fitna. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen says, when someone spreads the fire of fitna, they will be of the first people that are engulfed in that fire. Today, me and you, often it became very easy to become proponents of this fitna. How easy is it? I see something that someone has sent to me that has nothing to do with me, and I have not verified whether it's true or not. And even if it was true, it makes no difference to me, and I forward it to a number of people. Why? I'm being someone that is fueling that fire of fitna. Today it became very easy. In fact, you have certain people, their relationships are solely based around this. There are certain friends, family members, the only thing they can talk about is when there's an issue of fitna, some sort of scandal or gossip has taken place. And when they don't discuss fitna, there's nothing for them to discuss. When we talk about the idea that I'll be questioned about my tongue, I'll also be questioned about this thumb and the finger that I use when I send something that has nothing to do with me. When it's very easy for me to spread a rumor, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, don't allow yourself to be a proponent of this batil. And I'll give you one example of those that acted upon what the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam said. When a person goes to visit Imam al-Ridha salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi in Mashhad, sallu ala Muhammad wa there is a scholar that is buried in the holy shrine of the Imam Sheikh Baha'uddin al-Amili, known as Sheikh al-Baha'i. Sheikh Baha'i was someone who lived in Lebanon, but was made to move to Isfahan and migrate to Isfahan so that he could be one of the key jurists in Isfahan. And Sheikh Baha'i, what is interesting about him is that he has written in a number of different subjects. So you'll find, for example, Sheikh Baha'i has works in Arabic grammar, and he has works in Usul al-Fiqh, and he has work in Ilm al-Hadith, and Ilm al-Rijal, and he has works in chemistry, and he was an expert architect. And Sheikh al-Baha'i has his book Khulasatul Hisab on mathematics, which teaches all of mathematics in 30 pages, Until today in the Hawza they study Khulasatul Hisab of Sheikh Bahai. So he was an expert in a number of different fields. He's made to move from Jabal Amil to Isfahan to become a key scholar and jurist there. And at that time we're told that there is a scholar that already lives there, that is revered already, by the name of Mir Baqir Damat. Mir Baqir Damat is a scholar who is very respected in that city, Isfahan. And there is a king. And this king is the one that calls Sheikh Bahai to that city by the name of Shah Abbas. Shah Abbas now has noticed that this is a very sensitive situation. Why? Because we already have one great scholar here. Now I've called a new scholar. Straight away people begin to think competition, hasad, jealousy, fitna. Someone will start saying this is one party, this is that party, who is better? Jealousy. So when this happened, when these two scholars came together, one is from Isfahan, one has come from Lebanon, he wished to see what his scholars are like and whether fitna will be placed amongst them or not. And so he decides to take them to a trip. He places each of them on a horse, and he himself is also on a horse, and they go outside of Isfahan. And it turns out that the horse of Mir Baqir Damat is very slow, and the horse of Sheikh Bahai is very fast, and his own horse is normal, average. So they start off together. Those that have written this incident, they said they start off together. Naturally, as Sheikh Bahai's horse is faster, he gets ahead. And as Mir Baqir Damat's horse is slower, he falls behind. In the middle is Shah Abbas. He says, this is the time now that I test whether these are people of fitna or not. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, don't allow yourself to indulge in these things. Am I a person of fitna or not? He says, I went first to Mir Baqir Damat. I went back. I said, Sayyid Mir Baqir Damat, Sayyid. I said to him, Sayyid, you're from here, you're from Isfahan, you're such a respected scholar. Look at that Sheikh Bahai, how he's gone in front of you and he didn't stay behind. Out of respect for you, you should have ridden together. So this is the test. So what does Mir Baqir Damat say? Mir Baqir Damat says, no, you've misunderstood. That horse knows of the great status of Sheikh Bahai. That's why the horse has gone much faster. Instead of indulging in it and saying, you're right, he should have stayed behind. How is his akhlaq like this? He says, no. The horse has so much respect for him, it's gone quickly. He says, okay, he didn't indulge in the fitna. He says, let me go and see what Sheikh Bahai does. So he catches up to Sheikh Bahai. He says, you're our guest. Mir Baqir Damat is like the host. He's from this town and this city. He should be riding alongside you. Why is he riding all the way at the back? So Sheikh Bahai smiled and says, no, you haven't understood it. He says, what? He says, he has so much ilm and knowledge that his knowledge is weighing down the horse. That's why the horse is riding slowly. Shah Abbas at that moment, he gets off his horse, he recites a 2-unit prayer, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he was given scholars like this. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, when you want to deal with fitna like this. This is my third question. The fourth question then that arises is some people could use this idea that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam has presented and propagate something that is not intended. What do I mean? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, be like Ibn al-Labun. Don't allow yourself to be used for fitna. There were people during the time of Siffin that hadn't stood alongside Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, nor were they alongside Muawiyah. When the Imam goes to Siffin, they stay at home. Why? Just because Amir al-Mu'mineen had said himself, if there is a fitna, don't get involved. If there is a fitna, don't allow yourself to be used for fitna. And so they use this idea in that situation. Is this what we mean? Is this correct that there's a fitna going on? Therefore I stay back. Today, for example, in this world, I see a haqq and batil. Can I use that slogan? There's a fitna. Stay away from it. The answer is very simple. When we say there is a fitna, and therefore the Imam says, don't allow yourself to be used, that is when haqq is mixed with batil, when I can't differentiate between the two. And the example that is given in certain riwayat is of a very dark night, where I can't see that which is in front of me. If I'm in a very dark night, I can't see that which is in front of me. I'm not going to travel. But if in that same dark night, I see something illuminated. I see light in front of me. I see a way and a path to my direction. Of course I'm going to move. Here in Siffin, on one side you have a ma'soom and an infallible. Here the difference between haqq and batil is clear. Here you can't call it a fitna. Here it is clear where haqq is and where batil is. And so when we apply the principles of fitna, we don't apply it in situations like this. Today if I see haqq is very clear and batil is very clear, I'm told to stay away from any type of interference with that batil, any type of support from that batil. But I stand alongside the haqq. And therefore, this principle often was used as a slogan for those to misguide. That this is a fitna, stay away from it. If these discussions have been understood, I said then that this concept is one that comes in those riwayat that speak about the reappearance of Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, Ajillahu ta'ala farajuhu al-Sharif. Allahumma salli ala. And what shall happen in the end of times? And here there is a number of discussions that need to be had. The first is, what type of fitna will the mu'min go through? When you're told there's going to be a fitna in the end of times, what is this fitna? What is it that a person goes through? And so you will find that riwayat and ahadith are numerous, speaking about what that fitna is that the believer and non-believer goes through. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives an example. Abu al-Hasan alayhi salatu wasalam says, if there is a pot filled with some type of food, and you take that pot and you turn it completely upside down, he says that will be the state of Islam in the final days in Akhir al-Zaman. Meaning what? He says that which is ma'roof turns into munkar, and that which is munkar turns into ma'roof. People won't realize what their religion is. Why? Sometimes I come and tell you this is something batil. Sometimes it's clear that what I'm saying isn't part of Islam. No, that's not what happens in Akhir al-Zaman. The riwayat say in Akhir al-Zaman, someone says drinking wine is halal, not by saying it's wine, by saying it's another drink that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made permissible. The riwayat says in Akhir al-Zaman, someone comes and says riba and interest, you are allowed to take it. Not by calling it riba and interest, by calling it buying and selling. Someone comes and says rishwa, taking a bribe is allowed. Not by calling it rishwa, by calling it a gift. And so the riwayat say that people try to change ahkam such that a time will come where a mu'min wakes up a mu'min. By the time the evening comes, he has turned into a kafir. Other narrations say that holding on to their iman becomes very difficult. This is the fitna that is being spoken about in Akhir al-Zaman. For the riwayah says during that time, ilm and knowledge is lifted from the people. Jahl and ignorance becomes prevalent. This is the fitna that is spoken about. But the question comes, why is it necessary for that fitna to take place? If I'm told before the Imam reappears, there is this type of disunity. There is this type of mixing between truth and falsehood. Why? What's the philosophy behind that? Is that something that is needed? And there are many answers to this question that the ahadith have mentioned, but I mention one answer that is given in the riwayat and narrations that speak about Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam. For we find a number of similarities between what happens with Nuh and other prophets of God and that which happens with our a'imma alayhim wassalatu wassalam. This is one example. For you've heard that Nuh spends years propagating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion. Quran al-Kareem says for hundreds of years he propagates Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion, and there are very few people that remain believers. And we're told that any prophet of God can only be a prophet of God when they have patience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a person a prophet. One of the things that he takes into account is the sabr that they have. So Nuh is patient for a number of years. No matter what they do to him, he's patient. Until eventually we're told his patience and the patience of the believers that are with him runs out. We've been patient for a number of years. Every single time he does tabligh, someone throws something at him, someone verbally abuses him. His family also are in danger. The believers are in danger. Eventually, patience runs out. And so Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send his punishment on those people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he sends punishment, if you look at the history of any civilization, any group of people to whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent adhab and punishment, Allah never sends it straight away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delays it and delays it and delays it until finally then he sends the punishment. Why? Because it's possible that if he delays it for one day, someone may be saved. Someone may believe. Someone may hear that a punishment is coming and do istighfar and repent. And so Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, when he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that punishment is also salvation for his people from these people that are dhalimeen. So when he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this, we're told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him that a flood shall come. Those that are disbelievers shall be drowned in that flood. You and your followers build an ark. We know this. What happens then is more interesting. Is that Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam tells his followers, and those few people that believed, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to me. Soon the punishment shall come, we shall gain salvation. So the books of history say that Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam begins building the ark. And as he's building the ark, the people of Nuh are with him, the disbelievers make a mockery of him. What does this person think he's doing? And sometimes as he's building the ark, they pelt him in stones and cover him in pebbles and stones, and he lays there for a number of days. And Jibreel would descend down to help Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. These things take place. However, the time becomes longer and longer and longer. We're waiting for that punishment, we're waiting for that salvation. It hasn't come until Jibreel comes down. Jibreel comes down with seeds in his hand. The riwayah says, he tells Nuh, plant these seeds, something will happen. So what will happen? When you plant these seeds, a tree or trees shall grow. And when these trees shall be fruit bearing, that is the sign that the punishment is coming for them, salvation is coming for you. And the way that we have certain definite signs of the coming of the 12th Imam Salamullah alayhi, that we're told when these signs come, without a doubt he'll come. Like what? Like the rising of Sufyani, like the qatlun nafs zakiyya, the killing of the pure soul in the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Mecca, like the earth between Mecca and Medina swallowing an army as they try to destroy the grave of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And the cries of Jibreel. All of these are signs. We're told when you see these signs, be ready. Anytime the dhuhr will take place. Likewise, Jibreel came to Nuh salamullah alayhi and said, this is a sign. Plant it, sow the seed. When the tree grows and it's fruit bearing, this is the sign that very soon adhab is going to come. So he tells his people, they've been waiting for a number of years. They're very happy. They sow the seed. The tree grows. It's not fruit bearing. So they're waiting until that tree dies. Now, what entered into the heart of many of these people? Doubt. And so the narrations say that 1/3 of the small number of people that were left with Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam left him. Why? Because you made a promise. Your Lord said, when this tree has fruits, the adhab is going to come. The tree has died. Where's the promise? Jibreel came down a second time. Again with seeds in his hand. Ya Nuh, Nabi Allah, sow these seeds. So he did the same thing. He planted these seeds. Again a tree grew. Again before it was fruit bearing, the tree died. This happened a third time. The same thing happened. And each time a group of people left. Until eventually those that remained came to Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam and said, Ya Nuh, Nabi Allah, we don't care about whether the fruit is on the tree or not on the tree. Whether the tree is living or the tree dies, we believed in you, we stand by you. It doesn't make a difference to us whether it comes now or whether it comes later. Once those that were left with Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam were these believers, that's when the punishment came and the salvation came for them. And so the reason behind that was what? To remove, as I said, the key point of fitna, to remove impurity from the purity. The reason why there is fitna of Akhir al-Zaman is to remove those that in their hearts have nifaq, And so when they are unable to distinguish between haqq and batil, what is left are the believers that are pure. But someone may say, isn't this very difficult for us? A mu'min wakes up in the morning, a mu'min, by night time he becomes a kafir. Isn't this something very difficult, that the lines between haqq and batil, I can't differentiate between them? So the answer to this question, a person comes to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, in Akhir al-Zaman, that fitna is going to be very difficult. How can we manage to overcome that fitna? So the Imam, the hadith was in the daytime. The Imam says, look at the sky. What's in front of you? He says, the sun is in front of me. The Imam asks him a second time, what is there in front of you? He says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, al-Shams, the sun is there. He says, how clear were you able to identify this sun? He says, yes, Ya ibn Rasulullah. He says, that is how clear the truth shall be in Akhir al-Zaman for a person who surely is a believer. For a believer, there is no fitna. For a believer, I said the lines between haqq and batil is very clear. For the munafiq, they cannot differentiate between these two things. If all of these discussions have been understood, I said, there are certain people in history, when they wrote their books and they recorded the event of history, one of the atrocities and one of the injustice that was done in relation to Karbala and what took place in Ashura is some had the audacity to come and say Karbala was a fitna. They came and said Karbala was a fitna that took place with the ummah between Yazid ibn Muawiyah and Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. What is the response to those that said Karbala was a fitna? From all of my discussions, it becomes very clear. For I said fitna is only when haqq is mixed with batil. Let me give you an example. Sometimes I have something in my hand. This watch, for example, is in my hand. Sometimes I place it somewhere everyone can see it. It's out in the open. Sometimes I take it and I hide it. Before this majlis started, I came here, no one was here, method. I took this clock and I hid it somewhere. And then when everyone came, I said, where is that clock? You may have the best of eyesight, but because it's hidden, you weren't there, you don't know where it is. Someone says, no, I was there when Sheikh hid it, it is here in this direction. You may have the best eyesight, but you won't be able to see it. So sometimes something is placed out in the open. Sometimes something is hidden. When it is hidden, it doesn't make a difference. Your eyes are good or not, you don't know where it is. When something is placed out in the open, the only time you don't realize it is there is if you have a problem with your eyesight. It's right there in front of you, you can't see it. I can't see. I have weak eyesight. This is the example of haqq and batil. Sometimes, yes, I'm unable to differentiate, not because my heart can't see it, but because the situation means that haqq and batil is hidden. But sometimes the haqq is right in front of you. When it came to Karbala, the haqq was right in front of people. There's no comparison. On one side is Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. On the other side are the likes of Umar ibn Sa'ad and Ibn Namir. And if a person says there was a fitna on that day, we couldn't differentiate between haqq and batil. No, haqq was right in front of you. You couldn't see it because the eyes of your heart were weak and were unable to see the truth that was placed right in front of you. For as I said, when a ma'soom is on one side, there is no option other than support of that ma'soom. And so Karbala was far from a fitna. Karbala was clear truth on one side and clear falsehood on the other. And that's why you find those people that stood for Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salatu wasalam on that day, this was proof that the eyes of their heart and of their iman were the strongest of eyes. For what can I say about those that gave whatever they had for their ma'soom Abu Abdullah on that day? For there were those that gave money and wealth, and there were those that gave their children. For Ummul Baneen, as the poet says, from now, don't call me Ummul Baneen. From now on, don't call me Ummul Baneen, for no longer do my sons and my children live. Ummul Baneen gives whatever she has, and her life is service to the sons of Fatimah Zahra alayha salam. For when Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salatu wasalam leaves Madinatul Munawwara, as I mentioned yesterday, there were a number of people that were left behind. Separation is something very difficult. Separation is something that leads to every single second being a adhab and a punishment for that person. Every moment of separation is a difficulty. Why? Because when they were separated from Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, they didn't know what the state of Sayyid al-Shuhada was at any moment. When I'm with Sayyid al-Shuhada, I can see what his state is. When I was separated from him, I don't know, is he still alive? Or has he left this world? After the atrocities that take place, and Sayyidah Zainab is returning back into Medina, there were those waiting to hear the calls of Bishop. And there were those waiting to see that caravan. Zainab, when she left Medina, we're told when she goes onto her horse, Banu Hashim and Ahlul Bayt would surround her and say, we shall help Zainab onto her horse. When she returns back to Medina, no one is with her. And that's why they say, Medina tajaddina la taqbilina. Medina tajaddina la taqbilina wa bil hasrati wal أحزان جينا خرجنا منك بأهلنا جمعا ورجعنا بلا رجال ولا بنينا زينب انت زنت مدينة بشر سزى الخبر عند المعزى ومن المعزى يا سزى المعزى رسول الله. Zainab goes to the grave of Rasulullah. She says Assalamu alayka ya Jadda Salla alayka Malikus Sama. If there were not people around me, I would show you the bruises on my neck and my body. Zainab then goes to the grave of her mother Fatima Zahra. Then she enters into her house lamenting and crying for Abu Abdullah. They say that when Zainab enters into her house, Abdullah enters. Abdullah sees a woman in front of him. He says, do you not know this is the house of Zainab? You have all of Medina to cry for Hussein. This is the house of the sister of Hussein. Zainab looks at Abdullah. Oh Abdullah, what has Karbala done to me? What has Kufa and Sham done to me? Ala Zainab al-Kubra. Abdullah would say, your back has become bayant, and they would say there were bruises on the head of Zainab. I ask Zainab, why are there bruises on your head? Why can they not recognize you? She would say, do you not know when we were paraded between Kufa and Sham, and we were made to sit on camels without any stirrups? She would say, sometimes the young children of Hussein would fall on the ground, and when they would fall, I would make myself fall off the camel. Why? So that the caravan would stop and I would pick up the children of Hussein. But then why are there bruises on your face and on your head, Zainab? She would say, do you not know when someone falls on the ground, they use their hands to protect them, but my hands were covered in chains. Abdullah gives condolences to Zainab when suddenly there is a knock on the door. They open the door. She said, the messenger comes to Zainab. Inna fil babi imra'atan taqul ana ummul baneen. Zainab comes rushing. They look at one another. Ummul baneen would say, Husayna. Zainab looks at Ummul Baneen and would say, Wa akha wa Abbasa. And they say Ummul Baneen would spend her time in Baqi making 4 graves, and she would recite certain lines of poetry, and she would say, oh my son Abbas, I am thinking how you fell on the ground, for in one eye is an arrow, the other is covered in blood, and when someone falls they use their hands. How did you fall when your right hand was cut and your left hand was cut? She says the only explanation is when he fell he would fall on his face. على لعنة الله للقوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. إلهي بالحسين الوجيه وجده وأبيه وأمه وأخيه والتسعة المعصومين من ذريته وبنيه اغفر لأوليائنا وكف عنا أعداءنا واشغلهم عن أذانا وأظهر كلمة الحق واجعلها العليا وأدحث كلمة الباطل واجعلها السفلى إنك على كل شيء قدير. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة تسبقها الصلوات.